Hey guys, welcome back to Coffee Economics. If you're new to this channel, my name is Abe, and today we're going to be looking at three news stories. We're going to be looking at the Russia-Africa Summit, we're going to be looking at Uganda's oil deal, and also the issues that Kenya is facing with its tax policies. Let's get into it. The first topic is going to be the Russia-Africa Summit, which I believe has already kicked off at the recording of this video. Interestingly, only 17 heads of states are going, compared to about 40 something that went on when the summit was held in 2019. So one of the things that will be talked about in this summit is increasing relations with Africa and also our food security. So this ties back to the previous story I talked about last week regarding the Black Sea Grain Initiative or Grain Deal, where Russia said it's not going to be part of that deal unless some conditions are met. From what I know, so far nothing has been inked to make that deal happen. So there is a bit of uncertainty of what's going to happen there, and I explained in that video what will be the economic implications. If you want to check out that video, I can link it. I'll link it down below. But interestingly, this is something that I talked about in that previous video, that lots of the grain that comes out from that Russia-Ukraine region goes to Europe, and a few places in Africa actually get those grains. So even though food security is one thing, in terms of who gets the grains, there's a broader picture in that if Russia and Ukraine, because of this war, and a lot of grain comes out from that region, because of this war, prices for those products will go up, making it more expensive for other African countries, even though they do not get these grains directly from that Russia-Ukraine region. So it's got important implications, whatever this summit will bring out in terms of its results. Whether it's a positive result for Africa or not will be interesting. One of the things that they mentioned in this article is that Russia assured that African nations that it will replace the Ukrainian grain free of charge, as Russia is expecting a record harvest this year. So it's an interesting geopolitical move just to shore up relations with Africa and also help Russia really in terms of having still goodwill with Africa and having probably stronger trade partnerships with the continent. And I'll hop back on what I talked about in my previous video, in that it's interesting that we are needing Russia in terms of food security. There's quite a bit of arable land in Africa, underutilized land, even though it's not the best land. There's all these opportunities that have not been made in Africa. This issue of not having enough food or having to deal with high prices, I think it's something that could have been avoided with long-term strategic planning that keeps trying to get better every year, each country trying to get better every year. This could have been avoided, but this is the situation we're in right now. I think Africa will try its best to get the best deal they can get out of Russia, given that Russia is also in a desperate situation in terms of that economy. They want money, they want funds, they need something to help them as well. For Africa, they want the best deal, and I am a bit conflicted about this, but we'll see and keep watching what would be the result of this summit, whether they will come out with a deal that will assist some of the African countries get grains for cheap, or it will just be all talk and nothing will come out of it. The next story I want to talk about is Uganda's energy. The next story I want to talk about is Uganda Total Energies. The next story I want to talk about is Uganda's oil deal with Total Energies for drilling of the first oil wells in that Ugandan project. So this is a major boom for Uganda, being able to get revenue from its oil reserves. I want to talk about the pros and cons of this deal. There's the environmental implications of this deal, which are that by digging these oil wells, chances of oil spills or damaging of the land, because they'll be doing construction, digging the wells, causing damage to the ecosystems. That's got economic impacts, even though those impacts are not felt. That's one of the arguments environmentally, that there could be something in that land or in that ecosystem that could be beneficial in the future that we haven't discovered yet, we haven't thought about it yet, but we're valuing something that will give us money today. That's one argument. can put it to the side, shelve it there. The other argument is that this deal for me is rent-seeking a deal. Oil is one of the commodities that is going to become more and more out of fashion, with the world trying to switch from being using fossil fuels for energy to renewable sources of energy. I know it's a long-term thing, that it will not happen within the next few years. It will probably take a few decades for the world to fully transition away from oil and to other sources. Maybe it might not even fully transition to oil. Maybe what they tell us in the media about, new technologies might not be that might not be that real as they're expecting to be. They're estimating that these technologies could replace oil, but we'll see what the truth is. But in terms of a risk for Uganda is that they can have this deal, it'll probably bring jobs, and then when the oil market starts to crash or there's not so much demand for oil, would there be a need to subsidize this industry, because that's where jobs are being created? And because it's an industry that's not creating anything innovative, it's just a commodity, it's oil that you sell. Like, I think we are going backwards with Uganda is kind of going backwards with this deal, even though it feels like it's going forward. So it might be a great deal in the medium to short term, but in the long term, it will depend on what will be the things that Uganda does with the profits that it gets from this oil deal, and whether it will be able to get enough profits from this oil deal. Because I don't know how this deal has been struck, but it'll be interesting to see what those outcomes are for the country. So the positives is that this is a deal that's been made. Total Energies is seeing Uganda as a place that they can do business in. It's going to bring jobs. It's going to bring infrastructure into the country. It's going to bring skills into the country. And if Uganda is able to use these profits well that it gets from the royalties, hopefully from the oil reserves, is that it can invest it in other sectors that are going to produce more value to the whole economy, provide more jobs, make the economy even better than what it is, or make the economy stronger, I should say, and more robust to economic shocks and the like. So it'll be interesting to see if Uganda takes the path of UAE and the Middle Eastern countries, who have done a really good job of managing the little assets they had to make their countries be prosperous, vibrant, and still maintain the cultural values of those countries. So it'll be interesting to see how Uganda uses this deal to its advantage to grow its economy, to put its stake within the African continent as one of the serious and leading economies of Africa, and also in the world in general too. There's that potential as well. So it'll be interesting to see how this deal works out. There's these issues about greenwashing, which is about people saying, we're doing this project which we know has got bad impacts on the environment, but we've managed it by, doing all these other things to sort of make up for those negative effects, which ties back into that environmental argument. So whether this deal is good or bad it's all comes out down to how it's actually executed. If it is executed well, then everyone will look at this deal as one of the hallmark or marking changes for the Ugandan economy, if it really booms and brings lots of money for them to develop other industries. But if it doesn't, well, we'll be talking about this as well as a wasted opportunity, as investing in something that was useless from the get-go. So it'll be interesting to see. So the last story I want to talk about is the ongoing tax issues that are happening in Kenya, or revenue range. So the last story I want to talk about is Kenya's revenue raising issues, which have caused protests and a lot of kerfuffle around that. So Kenya is facing a revenue generation problem. So it's not raising enough money. So Kenya is not raising enough money to pay its debts and also be able to help grow its economy. And also it's facing spiraling inflation, which is one of the issues that is affecting many other countries. But the context of the revenue raising is because people are already facing cost of living pressures, because prices of goods and services are rising due to inflation. And Ruto has put these taxes at this time, and that's causing prices of things to go even higher, which is causing a lot of heartache for many people. So the key lesson I want us to kind of draw from here is that Ruto inherited this problem of the revenues, because even though he was in government, which is an interesting story in itself, many of these policies, in particularly in the choices of what things would be, the decisions to borrow for, to pay for X, Y, and Z, are coming now to for Kenya in terms of, it's at the point where if it doesn't raise enough revenue, they could get in trouble in terms of defaulting, and which will have worse implications than these tax revenue raising measures. So I do not think that raising taxes should cause people to be in more pain than they need to be. I think as economists, sometimes we tend to miss that. We think of things in a very theoretical framework, raise taxes to raise revenue, cut subsidies, and all these things. But then sometimes the human element is missed, which is quite sad in terms of how our profession does things sometimes, that we miss that human element. But here I want to also, like I said, I want to discuss about the fact that Ruto didn't inherited this problem, but this problem probably was already known before Ruto stepped into power. So the key thing that we need to explore is, as Africans, whether there needs to be a decoupling of politics from economic development. And what I mean by that is that we need to have an economic policy that does not get affected by elections and does not come into the remit of leaders saying, I'm going to do X and Y and Z to grow the economy, but rather those policies are already pre-decided by all parties according to a 20 to 30 year plan, that this is what we're going to do. Everyone has voted on, or not voted on it, but everyone has input on it. There's been a referendum with all, with the citizens, that this is how we want to do economic development. These are the things that we're going to cut. These are the things we're going to keep. These are the things that we want to invest in and how we want to invest in. It's a lot of thinking and process, right? But I think it might be more beneficial for African countries rather than, us voting for X, Y, and Z because they said they'll do this economic policy or do that economic policy. I don't think it will take away from the democratic process, but at least it will make those things that are fundamental to the economy be things that are done with a sense of unity. Because whether you're for the opposition party or the ruling party, that's still your home country, and whatever policies that they implement, whether they're done because of populism or done at the right policy at the wrong time, you as a citizen suffers. So I think we should really think about whether economic development policy should be separate from the political process, whether it should just be set out, agreed as a separate thing that every party, whether the ruling or opposition party, whoever comes into power, says we are going to follow these policies. They have already been agreed. You can't just change them because you feel like today you want to give a whole bunch of money to people so that you can get votes. I think they will still give power to the democratic process because people probably have other issues they want fixed. For example, it could be things around social justice or regional issues or things that are a bit more or broader social issues that people are thinking about. And I think that will help the African economy develop better. So I do commiserate with the people of Kenya regarding these issues, that even though the policy might be right, I think the timing has come at a bad time, and now it's all colliding into this situation where people are suffering and Ruto is trying to fix the problem. It's kind of like being a surgery or with the doctors and they need to fix an issue and it's going to cause more pain before it gets better. But then there's also that question, is that do they actually know to make the things better? And that's always a question that people should have for economists, that, are you really sure that this policy will make this thing better? Because sometimes policy ideas can be thrown out there, but not necessarily be really the right ones for the country that's facing that issue. So that's something I would like to leave for you guys as food for thought. So that's it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, make sure to hit the subscribe button, and I'll catch you guys in my next video.